Welcome to Gather for Wellness Radio, brought to you by GatherForWellness.com, where we bring wellness experts to you so you can listen, learn, implement, and thrive.
I'm your host, Becky Litwicki, and today is episode number 9. I'm so excited because our guest today is Megan Riley. Megan has been practicing yoga for nearly 20 years and teaching since 2009. She's a 200-hour Hatha certified yoga instructor. She's also certified in street yoga and expressive yoga, and she's had a profound impact on me and my spiritual journey. Here's a sneak peek.
Once you accept that it's not going to be easy, that it is going to be challenging, and get sort of comfortable with that, then you start experiencing not only the direct effects, the very obvious, immediate effects of the practice, but you start seeing it seep into your life, into other areas, and you go, wow, this is big. This is really changing me more than just physically.
Megan, so welcome to the show. We're so excited you're here.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
So can you share your story with us and talk a little bit about what led you to yoga?
Wow, what led me to yoga? Well, when I was a child growing up, I was always very athletic, but I wasn't exactly comfortable with competition. So while I participated in organized sports and exactly softball for probably a good decade, I never was really comfortable with the competitive edge to it. So I wanted to use my body. I was good at using my body. I was strong. I was flexible. I had really high endurance, and it was excited to be physical. But when it came to the competition, it never really felt right to me.
Interesting.
Yeah, and so for many years, I just kind of stopped being physically active because of that. And then I got a taste of the outdoors. So I started hiking and biking and going into the outdoors to be active. And so that was really nice. And when I discovered my love of live music, I also was able to throw dancing into the mix and able to get, very physical there. But then when I was 22 years old, I moved to Las Vegas. So I was born and raised in Illinois, but moved to Las Vegas. And through a friend of mine there, who I went on bike rides with all the time, one time we stopped and he said, hey, let's do a sun salute. So a sun salutation is a string of about 7 to 10 postures that you put together, and it really moves the body from top to bottom, every muscle group, every joint. And so we did a sun salute, and bam, that was it. I was hooked. I was hooked because I felt so strong, and I felt like this is it. This is what my body wants. And then when I started practicing yoga more formally, going to studios, going to classes, it didn't take me long to realize, wow, there's no competition here, and I have found my home for my physical needs. So it started out very much as exercise and satisfied that, but then, as you know, became much more in my life.
Yeah, Awesome. That's interesting because when I played basketball, I was always competitive, but I was never that person that, just wanted to run everybody over. People would always say, stop smiling. You're not supposed to smile. Well, I was having fun. I was there for the enjoyment of it. So it's interesting you say that because a lot of people, I think, like you said, they just choose to then not participate in sports or not be physical, but there's so many other ways. Yeah. Cool. Okay, so for many people, yoga is about being bendy or, stretching, and sometimes there's a meditation piece maybe, but can you talk about what yoga really is and kind of the magical impact that it can have on our lives and the lives of others?
Yes. Well, I suppose technically or literally speaking, yoga is an ancient scientific system that targets mind, body, and spirit. So in the Eastern world, that is understood immediately when you explain it. In the Western world, we have really removed spirituality from any form of exercise, certainly, or at the very least from science. So spirituality and science are very separate. But in this ancient system, which dates back really anywhere from 2,000 to 5,000 years, so there's a big gap of question there when it began. But in this system, there is no softening the fact that spirituality is very much a part of it. So yoga is this system where you move the body into these physical postures that are called asana. So asana means posture in Sanskrit. And you move the body connected to the breath, and through that you're navigating what is known as the life force energy in the body, prana. So as you navigate prana in the body, then it becomes this more spiritual experience in the sense that you're trying to connect mind, body, breath all together into the spirit and into the spirit to experience your oneness. So sometimes we get trapped feeling like I'm just a physical body, or sometimes we get trapped in I'm just a mental being. But yoga really challenges you to bring all three layers of your being into one, and then to participate in the practice from that standpoint. Which is why, really, I suppose magical is a great word that you used, because sometimes in the yoga world, once we really start experiencing the transformations that it can bring into your life, we do say it's magic. That it's almost like this little secret that we have for wellness. And while it's very challenging physically and mentally and spiritually, once you accept that it's not going to be easy, that it is going to be challenging, and get sort of comfortable with that, then you start experiencing not only the direct effects, the very obvious, immediate effects of the practice, but you start seeing it seep into your life, into other areas, and you go, wow, this is big. This is really changing me more than just physically, impacting me more than just physically. So that's what yoga is. In terms of the scientific system. If someone wasn't wanting an answer with quite that depth, I would just say, yoga is the word very literally translates to either union or yoking or connection. So for me, that connection, that yoking, is of breath and movement, is of inhalation and exhalation. The connection of your strength to your flexibility, the balance of your mind and your spirit. So we're kind of bringing two things together. It could also be bringing exercise together with mindfulness. So there's several ways to look at what the meaning of yoga is, what you describe it, but it's a scientific system for wellness.
And it's awesome.
And it's awesome.
So what do you, I know one of the other guests that I interviewed talked about how she basically said, like, the further you get in yoga, the deeper your relationships are. Do you agree? And how do you see that? Because I know in class a lot of times you talk about how it's not just about what we're doing for ourselves. It's about how we impact the whole world.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So this connection that I spoke about, the word yoga meaning connection. This connection begins internally. It begins with oneself when you're in the practice. So you start to connect your mind, body, and spirit, and then you become more self-aware. And as you become more self-aware, you realize that you are not alone, that you are connected to the larger group of all beings on the planet. So the ego starts to soften a little bit. When you first come to a yoga class, you might be exercising. I want to be fit. I want to have a rockin' body. I want to be healthy. Or I want to fix some injuries or heal my pain in my body. So you come from a place that's very ego-driven. But as you get deeper and deeper into the practice and gain a more authentic understanding of who you are, you start to build in a self-compassion. And that self-compassion really doesn't allow you to look into the eyes of another being without knowing that they have those same needs, those same needs to heal, those same needs for wellness. So you become more empathetic, you become more compassionate to other beings because you're more aware of who you are. So this connection that you experience with yourself begins to translate into the space between you and the people that you have relationships with. And that's how I would define a relationship. If someone said, what's a relationship? I would say it's the space between two people.
Yeah.
How do we navigate that space? What are we putting into that space? What are we receiving from that space? And so, yes, these relationships become deeper because you realize, really in a way, that the connection between you and other beings is so profound that at its deepest level, there really is no difference between you and the person sitting next to you. And another reason is because you become more mindful, you become more conscious through this practice. Most yoga environments, will encourage wellness, kindness, compassion, self-love, love towards others. Will encourage you to be honest, to start removing illusions. So you're not only going in and getting this exercise, but your teachers are actually challenging you to take a real good hard look at yourself, your faults, your demons, your darkness, as well as your strengths, your attributes, and the parts of you that are positive. And so as this happens, and you come back to your relationships when you leave the yoga studio, when you leave the mat, when you're off the mat and in your life, lo and behold, one day you go, whoa, I'm starting to take the lesson of compassion my teacher taught me in class today, and I'm starting to apply it to other things outside of the yoga studio. And one of the first places you see this is in your relationships. So when your teacher is teaching you to be patient with yourself because you fall in and out of balance all the time in your tree pose or in your eagle pose, when you leave the studio and you have just fallen 10 times trying to balance, but you still accept yourself because your teacher taught you that as well, then when you go out into the world and somebody that you're engaged with is falling or stumbling, figuratively speaking, in their life, you will most likely make a connection between what you just experienced on the mat, you're falling, and they're falling. And so it really it creates that connection once again. And I think the other way it affects your relationships is that you're having a spiritual awakening, whether it takes you 2 weeks because you were that ready, 2 months, or if it takes you 2 decades on your yoga journey, because it's a different rhythm, a different pace for everybody. You become so spiritually, consciously, mindfully awake that it's impossible not to be compassionate with other people.
Yeah. I remember one time in class you said that yoga ruins your life. Yeah. Because, I mean, it's so true. Sometimes I've had so many conversations with my friend after we've learned about, the ins and outs of healthy eating. And it's kind of like, man, sometimes I wish I didn't know how bad these things were for me or how much I should be eating all this other stuff. Like, sometimes you just, wish it were easy. And yoga, I think, is the same way. Like, once you see that life can be that way, there's no going back. No. You can't pretend you didn't see or feel it or, witness it. So
yeah, you have to take responsibility. In Sanskrit, it would be the word Maya, M-A-Y-A. Maya is a veil or an illusion. So we have these various veils that we put in front of us through life, whether we do it consciously or unconsciously. We have these veils, these illusions that sort of, maybe we're protecting ourselves with them, so maybe they have a very functional purpose, or we just might not even realize the veils there, or we might very purposely sort of lie to ourselves to get through a situation that's challenging. But with yoga, as you start getting deeper into the practice, you start making these connections, you start opening your eyes and awakening, these veils get removed, and now you're looking the truth, you're looking authenticism, you're looking reality straight in the eye. And yes, now we have this like burden, if you will. The veil is gone, Maya has disappeared, and now you're dealing with reality. And so there's work there. It's not easy to live in a very real situation where everything's truthful and authentic. You have to take responsibility for it. So in a way, yoga does ruin your life because if you do the work, that you will have to work very hard towards your wellness. You can't just sit around to be well. You have to do the work.
Yeah. And that's another one of my favorite quotes from your classes, is that you have to do the work. And I think a lot of people, again, tie it to that physical exertion that, I'm going to go to yoga and I'm going to work really hard to do a handstand or be bendy or something like that. But like you said, it's much deeper than that.
Yeah. Saying doing the work is one of my favorite phrases because it can click to people at all levels. So as you said, it can click very easily for the novice or for the athlete or for the person who's wanting to heal from injury. They can come in and be in that place where they're maybe only at the point where they're dealing with the practice as a body. Like they haven't reached the point yet where they're controlling the body with the mind or allowing the spirit to guide both. They can understand and relate to, okay, if I physically work hard, I'll see the results. And that's okay, because that's the beginning of the journey for many of us. And we need to feel those successes, those failures. We need to feel breaking through boundaries in the physical body to be able to get a little taste of how healing the practice can be. But I hope that at all levels people realize that doing the work in terms of meditation, in terms of the breath work, in terms of the focus, that those also come, because that work will just launch the practice into really, really high levels of success and really high heights. So my point being that oftentimes students, and a dear friend and a teacher of mine, Pavla Halaskova, she and I partnered together, and we were talking about how often students will come up and say, you know, that pose is so hard for me, it's so easy for you to do, you can't understand my struggle. And we take a step back with the student and say, look, you know, number one, once upon a time, that pose was not easy for me. Right. It was very challenging for me, and I had to work very hard to get to the place where I'm at now. But also this sort of idea, you know, continuing about yoga ruined my life. You can't just practice for a year and then for the rest of your life benefit from that year. It is a forever practice. It is a journey that takes you from the beginning of this, you know, embodiment, from your birth to the death in this body. If you practice, it's a journey that whole time. And in that time, you have to do the work. It's not going to come easy. Maybe one day it will. Yeah. But I guarantee you, if you stop and then you go back a year later or 3 weeks later,
it's not going to be any easier.
It's not going to be easy. You almost have to start over again. So doing the work is the component, and you're doing it for yourself. You have to do the work yourself. No one can do it for you. You have to be disciplined. You have to be focused. But you also have to be kind to yourself. Accept yourself. Accept where you're at. No room for self-hatred in it. Self-acceptance.
Oh, I love that too, because I think so many people try to look elsewhere for, you know, they don't want to take responsibility for what they're doing, whether that's in yoga or at work or, you know, in any area of life. I think it's a good lesson to be learned on the mat, because it's hard to come by, you know, for people to take responsibility for themselves.
Yeah, we encourage, there's I forget which teacher, so pardon me, I think it's Rodney Yee said that yoga is not a workout, it's a work in. And I love that phrase, because it not only brings it off the body and into the heart a little bit, but it is really relevant in a culture, in a society where we look for external stimulation to bring us happiness. When all of the great spiritual leaders know, and anyone who's been working from within for any amount of time on their self, through meditation, through any other sort of mindful practices, that when you're not going to find the answer outside of yourself. You're not going to find happiness outside of yourself. You're not going to find wellness outside of yourself. It all comes from within. So the more time you spend looking outside of yourself to bring you peace, balance, and happiness, the less you're going to be content in this lifetime, or feel like you have a happiness that you can experience the joy of being. It all comes from within. Everything that you need, you have. You just have to plug into yourself, really.
Yeah. I think that's so cool, because you hear that all the time, right? Like, oh, the happiness is already there. And I remember hearing that for years, and I was I kind of bought into it, but I hadn't really experienced it for myself until I started doing yoga and adding some meditation and, you know, things like that. And I'm like, no, this is really real. Like, it's pretty cool how it is all there for you. You don't have to look outside of yourself. So it's awesome. All right. What is your favorite way to overcome fear?
Ooh, wow, fear. Well, if you had asked me this question a decade ago, I would have had a very different answer. I would have perhaps said something like, talk about it, or express it, or, write it down, or, write myself some affirmations that I can remind, or visualize myself being successful within the thing I'm scared of, or run like hell away from it.
Yeah.
Why not run from it? If you're scared, there are very real reasons to run. If a tiger is chasing you in the forest, run.
Yeah.
So there's it's okay. But now I experience fear very, very, very seldom. It's a hard question for me to answer, because fear is the result of some sort of attachment to some sort of belief or some sort of expectation that you have. And I'm not talking about the fear of a tiger. I'm talking about the fear of not having enough money, the fear of getting cancer, the fear that someone won't love me or accept me. These kind of fears that we face in society today. And I have really come away from facing, or from dealing with fear in that sense, because to me, it's not real. And I've detached from so many of my attachments in life, and it's been a very conscious, purposeful process I've brought myself through. So the more I find that I practice non-attachment, the more I find myself not really experiencing fear. Yeah. And the other thing is that I have come to a place through this practice where I have discovered and I have a deep understanding for how incredibly powerful we are. We are not helpless. We are very powerful. Yeah. We have the power to heal. We have the power to change our perceptions. We have the power to make a choice between looking at a glass half empty or half full, right? We have all of these choices. And when you feel empowered, which this practice helps you, when you start kicking up into those handstands, when you finally are able to touch your fingertips just barely to the earth, when you experience these little successes in your practice, you start to realize how powerful you are, and fear starts to sort of fall away. And we practice fear on the mat all the time. We practice things that have a risk level to them. So you practice doing something like a headstand, lifting your feet off the ground while you're standing on your head. That's very scary for some people. Yeah. But when you practice that on the mat and nail it, it puts a imprint of that emotion in your body. And then when you go out in the world and your boss looks at you that day and says, you're fired, can you go back to the emotional imprint that headstand gave you and react to the fear a little bit differently? So I think by being in the present moment, fear isn't as powerful. But if I had to answer the question very literally, I would say I would deal with fear by meditating. Yeah. Okay, there's the thing I'm scared of. Go sit quietly. Remove all the garbage that's going to start entering my head, all the stories, all of the chatter, all of the dialogue that is going to feed the fear. Go sit, be quiet. Remove that dialogue and silence, and then let the truth sort of surface. Yeah. Let it bubble up. Yeah. And now I've removed Maya. I removed the veil. I'm not looking through the illusions of my mind, these stories anymore. We get so busy in our mind. Yeah. That's why meditation's so great. Okay, now I've removed the veil. I'm seeing the thing I'm scared of with a bit more clarity. Take a breath. Now how do I deal with it? Because at the end of the day, what's the worst situation that we can perceive? Probably death. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's going to happen anyways. Yeah.
Oh, what if we're not scared of death?
Yeah. Yeah. So for you, you said you started a process of removing specifically removing things in your life that were fearful to you, or that were maybe challenging for you in that kind of way. How... I think a lot of times fear isn't necessarily something we even recognize. Yeah. We limit ourselves and what we believe can be true because we're scared of it. But what do you recommend for even recognizing those things? Or do you think that just comes with like gaining your power?
Yeah, I think through gaining self-awareness. So there's several things that are sort of the ultimate goals in yoga. Things like inner peace, or being in the present moment. There are some of these big goals, and one of them is self-awareness. So as you become more self-aware, certainly you'll start to recognize the sort of symptoms of your fear. But I mean, just like anyone else, I'll feel a tightening in the chest. I'll feel a lump in the throat. I'll feel a skip of the heartbeat, or I'll stop breathing, or I'll breathe shallow, really heavy, or I'll start tightening and clenching muscles. So I recognize fear definitely it will manifest physically. And then I think when I have been sort of trapped into a fearful place, what ends up happening is emotion really arises. And there's a little idea of, are you living your life based only on emotion, or are you taking those emotions, stepping back from them, observing them consciously, and then navigating around that thing that you're scared of, instead of only using the emotions as the driver for navigating through the situation. We should really be using the mind, using our consciousness. And so the practice, meditation specifically, but the practice has helped me do that through a greater level of self-awareness, a greater level of self-realization. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
You had just 5 minutes to create better wellness for yourself. What would you do?
If I had 5 minutes to create better wellness, I would drink a glass of water, and then I would sit down and meditate with every second of those 5 minutes. Nothing brings greater peace than stillness. Nothing brings greater wellness than stillness. And I know I've mentioned it a lot in our time talking here, but I can't emphasize anything more.
Yeah.
I mean, the asanas, the postures, the movement is incredibly important. It's important for our body to move because it creates an environment in the physical body where we have the capacity to sit still in meditation. In fact, that is the purpose behind asana, behind these postures. It's really just to move the limitations out, to soften the muscles, to open the joints, to lengthen the spine, to physically prepare the body for stillness. Because meditation, dhyana, is one of the 8 limbs of yoga, and this is really the emphasis. And so if I only had 5 minutes for wellness, it's just like when an adult looks at a child who is having some panic or anxiety attack, and we say, take a deep breath. Like, every parent in the world knows this little trick. You tell your child to take a breath because it calms them down. And it's no different for us as adults. So sitting in stillness, listening, really listening to yourself, not the stories again, not the chatter, but for the truth to rise. It can only come through meditation. And so that's really, for me, that's it.
That's been, I think, like 50% of the guests on the show have answered with meditation.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people are scared of meditation, right? Because they think that they want it to be perfect, and they want it to be, a monk sitting on top of a mountain with, pure silence in their mind and things like. I think a lot of people perceive meditation to be that, or like kind of woo-woo and out there. What do you recommend for somebody who maybe has just started or hasn't really tried meditation before? How would you recommend they start it, and can you expand?
Well, I know it talk about fear. Yes, we do have a fear of the unknown, and in particular to meditation, we might not realize it or even be willing to admit it, or not even know that we're not willing to admit it. We have a fear of sitting in stillness, in quiet, facing ourselves. Because when you face yourself, certain truths surface, like I talked about earlier, and we don't want to face the truth about ourselves in some realms of our life. And so, again, it's like we said, yoga ruins your life. Meditation, while it certainly doesn't ruin your life, it will put you in a position where you have to face yourself. You have to sit with yourself. You have to listen to yourself. And that puts you in a position of either having to take action and make some hard changes in your life, or to do something that's even much harder for some people, which is just plain simple self-acceptance. Accepting who you are, not the image of who you are, not what society says you should be, not what your lover wants you to be, not what your mother wants you to be, who you are.
Yeah.
And it takes a lifetime for some of us to fail at self-acceptance. It is a lot of work in this lifetime to step into that place where you truly accept who you are. And I think, coming back to your question, though, if I had 5 minutes, to engage in a wellness activity and I put meditation aside, I think the other thing I'm most passionate about in this lifetime is healthy, whole food eating. And I'm saying that from a position of a vegan, of someone who does not want to eat in animal products, does not want to participate in the mass suffering of animals. But when we take a look at the number one thing damaging our world, our environment, it's animal agriculture. I mean, there's all this talk about, removing pollution from the air, stop burning fossil fuels. But if there's any decision that you and I can make as an individual that's more important than buying our hybrid car, than turning the water faucet off while we're brushing our teeth, all of these conservation measures, while they're important, 51% of the damage that is caused to our planet comes from animal agriculture, plain and simple. And so for me, the answer is taking on a healthy diet. So not only does it heal you as an individual and put you in a position of wellness, but it puts the entire planet in a position of wellness. And it's something I'm incredibly I'm passionate about. So when we combine this idea of yoga, of meditation, of mindful, conscious, healthy eating, because to me, eating is really an ethical act. It's less and less physical to me. Yeah. It's so ethical and so spiritual of an act that if we're not harming anyone by the way we're eating, as opposed to harming many, many, many things, not only the animals, but the earth itself in the way we eat, wellness won't only be in my body, it will be for the whole planet. So it's something I'm really passionate about.
Yeah, very cool. I can tell. I love that. All right, and then lastly, what is your most powerful health habit?
Loving. Loving. It's I was born a very positive, happy person. I'm a happy person by nature. And I've had very little traumas in my life to sort of derail me from that. And I'm incredibly blessed in that realm. I'm very grateful. I try every day not to take it for granted and not to sort of operate from a place of privilege. I'm aware of how blessed I am in my life. But through this practice and through this sort of evolution in my spiritual being, the greatest giver of joy, the greatest giver of healing, the greatest giver of happiness is really just loving yourself. Number one, loving and accepting yourself, but being as loving and patient and as compassionate as you can with other beings. It will heal you. Yeah. Beautiful.
Megan, you are such an inspiration to me, and I know so many other people, and I'm so, so grateful for your time today and for all the wisdom you've shared, so we appreciate you, and thank you.
Oh, thank you, Becky. I'm glad to be with you. Namaste.
Thank you so much for joining us for today's episode of Gather for Wellness Radio. We'd greatly appreciate if you'd leave a review over on iTunes, Stitcher, or the blog. And don't forget to share this episode with your friends, family, and on social media. We hope you'll join us for the next episode. But until then, keep being awesome.